Hey there, you're listening to the Living Mandala podcast. Want to just jump on right before the episode starts. Yet another great episode with astrologer Rachel Ruth Tate. We're going to be talking all about Mercury for this episode, all things Mercury. What is mercurial? What does it mean in a natal chart? How does it expand out into various correspondences, like the runes, like the day of the week, etc.? But stick around after the bell because I want to also have a conversation about the mercurial layer of your home. Of course, the Living Mandala podcast is all about these correspondences and how they relate back to the home, how we can see Mercury's influence in this example in and through our lives and in our homes. So without any further fanfare, please enjoy the latest and greatest episode with Rachel Ruth Tate, all about Mercury. Thanks so much. You're listening to the Living Mandala podcast. My name is Ara. And the Living Mandala of the Planets series continues with the planet Mercury. I am joined here by Rachel Ruth Tate, friend and astrologer here in the North Texas area. So we're moving on to Mercury, which is, of course, that first little teeny tiny planet from the sun. It's the smallest in our solar system. It's roughly the same surface gravity as Mars. So it's teeny tiny, but it's got a similar surface gravity to Mars. It's just a little further out. In English, it's named after the Roman god Mercurius, or Mercury. This is the god of commerce, communication, messenger of the gods. In classical Roman mythology, Mercury is the messenger, noted for his speed and swiftness. You may also know him by the name Hermes. That's another name for Mercury. So let's get into Mercury. Rachel, talk to us.
Mercury is the first of the personal planets. If you've been listening to this series, you heard us go over the luminaries. So Mercury is the mind, the thought, the expression or communication exchange, which is transport. That's also creation, creativity, children, siblings. There are a lot of correspondences for Mercury. But Mercury also is the swiftest moving of the planets, like you mentioned. And that speaks to how quickly we can move through our thoughts, generate new thoughts, the speed of communication and the exchange of ideas, all the things which can be expressed through the air and air waves. Mercury is triplicity ruler of all air signs, and it rules the signs of Gemini and Virgo. Gemini is the third sign in the zodiac. It is our mutable air sign, ruled by Mercury, represented by the twins. Twins Castor and Pollux, one of which is mortal, one is immortal. And so this is the full spectrum of possible thought, all the things which can come out of the mind. Mind products can be various, right? There's a wide range of possibility for human thought, expression, invention. And then Mercury's other sign is Virgo. Virgo is the sixth sign in the zodiac, and it is our mutable earth sign. And it's also Mercury's sign of exaltation, which I find interesting. Mercury, like you said, is a relative hermaphrodite. It's not masculine, not feminine. Hermes, or Mercury, was the most flexible of the gods. He was the only god that could go from Olympus down to the earth plane and all the way into the underworld with Hades and, those souls which are not incarnate on earth but have been incarnate. So Mercury is the psychopomp, and the mind can travel. It can travel back in time, forward in time. The mind can leave the body and go somewhere else entirely. So it can mentally be transported. And Virgo is its sign of exaltation because Virgo is the receptive of Mercury's signs. We talked about the sun and the moon. The sun is assertive or young, so it only has a masculine sign. The moon is receptive or feminine, only has a feminine sign. So Mercury has both. One, because it's a hermaphrodite, and two, because each of the personal planets has an outward expression and an inward expression. Gemini is Mercury's outward expression. But Virgo is my favorite because it speaks to the fact that Mercury's inward expression, the taking in of ideas, the taking in of information, the parsing it out into meaningful groups, the ability to understand, right? It's the difference between intelligence and wisdom. And Virgo is Mercury's wisdom of being able to make sense of all that which can be manifest in the creation and actually understand it data-wise, facts-wise. Virgo is the accountant. Virgo is the scientist. Quite literally, Virgo represented by the Virgin. The Virgin, it can be kind of hard to understand. Like, what does that mean? What does Mercury even mean with the Virgin? I like to use the example of the computer. So the first expression of a computer was not a machine, but rather a female person who would be the secretary, the accountant, the calculator, if you will, of all things. And so the first man on the moon was put there by the calculations of a woman. The Apollo missions, before we actually had the ability to do that digitally. So I love the idea that Mercury's internal expression is also its exaltation or best place.
Cool. Very good. Well, and in the Chakras of the House series, this is going to make perfect sense. We touched on with Dr. Barnard the throat chakra being linked with Mercury, which, that makes perfect sense in terms of speaking, communication, words, expression, things of that nature. So the throat chakra, you can go do a deep dive on that on a prior episode. The metal correspondence with Mercury is Mercury.
Wow.
AKA Quicksilver. So it's the mercury that's in thermometers. So it has that fluidity to it that you're pointing to. The day of the week is Wednesday. Now, Wednesday comes from the Old English Woden or Norse. Is it Norse? Or I feel like I should have my act together with this, but it's Woden for Wednesday. But really, it's also Mercury. So, Wednesday is Mercury's day. Good colors to wear on Wednesday would be green, but also pinks. It's got that hermaphroditic quality to it. So often I will wear pink or green on Wednesday, but mostly green.
In Latin-based languages, it's more obvious. In French, it's Mercredi.
Oh, right.
And in Spanish, miércoles. So you can see the Mercury in Latin language.
See it in Latin, for sure. When we get to Tuesday, same thing. Okay, in terms of the runes, the rune that I would point to would be Ehwaz, E-H-W-A-Z. It's a capital M. It's a rune of transit and movement, and it's linked with Gemini and therefore with Mercury. And the other rune that I would associate is with Virgo. It's Berkana. It's a capital B. That's the shape of the rune. It's all about fertility, birth, and growth. It could be a new idea or even a person. And because of that linkage with Virgo, I'm also going to link it with Mercury in terms of the runes. In the tarot, the Magician is often linked with Mercury, which also makes good sense, right? Spell casting, magical acts, all mercurial. Okay, talk to us about a yoga pose that you would recommend to connect with Mercury.
So going off of the throat chakra, one of my favorites is Matsayasana, which is fish pose. It's kind of maybe a pose that the listeners might not be familiar with, but it's a very large throat opener.
Nice.
So the throat, while it is not one of the body parts that Mercury signs rule, it is like the vibration of the vocal cords by way of the air, right, is how we communicate and make ourselves known. But the parts of the body associated with Gemini, it is specifically the lungs, right? So the air that we use to vibrate those vocal cords, and then also the arms and the hands. And in this particular pose, you are balanced on forearms, pressing down through the hands, opening the throat at the same time. So the lungs are able to open very expansively in this pose. Virgo's correspondence is with the lower alimentary system, with the gut, with the intestines. And the intestines are not just where we process food, right? But it's also where we have a lot of our immune system located. And more neurons are there down in the lower alimentary system than anywhere else outside of the brain. So the brain and the gut is associated with Mercury. And in this particular pose, there is a nice opening through the lower belly as well. And so we can activate these spaces while allowing them to be cleared and cleansed through the pranayama breathwork practice, which I don't directly associate with Mercury exclusively, but pranayama breathwork using those lungs, very, very Gemini. And so I would recommend that in this Matsyasana pose, if you choose to look it up and take it, that you attempt maybe a little breath work, maybe in this particular pose.
Nice. And I want to point out, you're bringing in parts of the body, the physical body, which is different than the chakras. So I would just point out that distinction for anybody that has inadvertently collapsed the two. The chakra system is an energetic, these are vortices that are at various sort of rough places in our body, but they are not our body. They're not linked, with parts of the body like the hands or well, that's not entirely true either, but that was a bad example. But what you're pointing to with the yoga poses is that actually how to get the body part versus the chakra. So I just want to make that clarification.
Hopefully in this one, both, right?
Right. Well, exactly. And in this one, both, for sure. In terms of the orbit vibration of Mercury, when you look at the orbit vibration of Mercury from geocentrically, so from the point of view of the Earth, it's a daisy petal. And if you look at it over time, you can just sort of feel what a quick moving planet it is. And you can see all the little retrogrades that broop, 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 that just make their way through. We have about 3 retrogrades a year in Mercury. It's real evident when you see 1 year plotted of Mercury versus many years plotted of Mercury. You can just see them. There they are, little loop-de-loos. And so it kind of has that, higher vibration feel to it, because it is thoughts. It is buzzing thoughts and words, right?
And its day is actually longer than its year.
Right. Yes, which is also super cool and strange. So the takeaway, the meditation, the activity, if you will, associated that I've put together for Mercury, is the Orphic Hymn to Mercury. I'm going to read it in just a moment. But the Orphic Hymns, these are 87 very brief poems that are calls to various deities. Okay, and this is the call to Mercury, the Orphic Hymn to Mercury. Here we go. Hermes, draw near, and to my prayer incline, angel of Jove and Maia's son divine, prefect of contest, ruler of mankind, with heart almighty and a prudent mind, celestial messenger of various skill, whose powerful arts could watchful Argus kill. With winged feet 'tis thine through air to course, O friend of man and prophet of discourse. Great life's supporter to rejoice is thine, in arts gymnastic and in fraud divine. With power endued all language to explain, of care the loosener and the source of gain, whose hand contains of blameless peace the rod, Coroshian, blessed profitable God, of various speech whose aid in works we find, and in necessities to mortals kind. Dire weapon of the tongue which men revere, be present, Hermes, and thy suppliant hear. Assist my works, conclude my life with peace, give graceful speech, and memories increase. So that's the call to Mercury, one of the Orphic hymns, to summon Mercury's presence. The suggestion is fumigation with frankincense while you're doing such a thing. So I thought that was a really cool thing to offer. You can hear the language in that Orphic hymn of words and of air and all of the things, the tongue and all of the things that we've been talking about. They're very present.
The hands, the writing, the commerce.
Right. The magician, right? It's all there in the call to Mercury. So I would offer that up. Of course, there's Orphic hymns to the moon and to other various deities, but this one I just thought was really cool. So that's Mercury for you folks. Anything else to add about Mercury?
No, I think this has been perfect. And I mean, Mercury is the entire spectrum of human thought expression and exchange. So there is a lot more to say about it, but I'll let everyone do their own mercurial research.
That's right. Awesome. You're listening to the Living Mandala podcast. Hey there, it's me again. So I wanted to stick around after the bell and talk a little bit about what the Mercury layer is within the house and home. So for me, when I think about Mercury and all of the qualities that Rachel and I have just discussed, for me, this shows up in the form of internet plans, phone plans, apps, maybe on the phone that we're using or not using. It turns into evaluating digital subscriptions like Netflix and Disney Plus or whatever your subscriptions are. This is the mercurial layer of your life. These are the things that you enjoy, that you process information. And maybe it's also like your bookshelves. What if it's time to purge and reshelve your library there at the house? Balance your checkbook if you haven't done it in a while. These are all good mercurial things to think about. Anything to do with technology, maybe it's time to back up your computer. At the time of the airing of this podcast about Mercury, Mercury is in what's called retrograde, and that is a great time to evaluate all of the mercurial layer within your reality. So that would be the invitation here, is to take a look at that mercurial layer, particularly while Mercury is in retrograde. Make some decisions, and then once Mercury goes direct, more towards the end of the month, then definitely it's time to start taking action on those things. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Living Mandala podcast. See you next time when we discuss Venus.